There are a variety of ways to promote movies online these days. From Twitter to Instagram to YouTube, the way they roll out the massive red carpet for promotional material is diverse, to say the least. However, in the more primitive days of the internet, that wasn't always the case. As early marketing material couldn't rely on social media, this meant you actually had to work on getting the marketing to be as precise as possible. This included trailers and TV spots, but also movie websites, specifically created for the motion picture itself. These little pages, which usually lasted up as the film got released to home media, had to be as eye-catching and eye-popping as possible. In recent years, though, these type of websites have seemingly all but disappeared. Nowadays, when you see a little blurb at the end of the trailer, it links to the movie's Fandango page or a social media platform. This only begs the question, how did this happen? How did we get here? When did we get from more creative pages to simple online aesthetics like this one? Well, the answer probably wouldn't surprise you at all. But still, I'd like to go through a brief history of movie websites, why they exist in the first place, and why they ultimately died out. Not to mention my favorite examples of movie website design attempts. So without further ado, as we always do, remember to subscribe and hit that like button. Also, check out my website, dansden.net. Anyway, this is a buckling up that is dans.netting to the max. But first, in my typical Dan way, some brief context. The internet in the early days was a very different place. While it still obviously was internet superhighway of information, it was much slower and outside of emails, which went at their own, let's just say, glacier speed. It was hard to connect or talk with people immediately. This included movies. As has been proven time and time again throughout history, initially a lot of studios were hesitant to use the internet, finding the new medium, for lack of better words, difficult to understand. However, some companies were quicker to jump on the bandwagon than others. The first official promotional movie website dates back to 1994. Upon my actual research, the sci-fi motion pictures Stargate and Star Trek Generations are largely credited as being the very first movies to use websites to market their films, and actually, it's a bit of a contentious debate as to who came first. For example, the most sacred of texts, IMDb Trivia, lists Generations as being the first movie to have its own website. And as we all know, IMDb Trivia is always right. However, as it actually turns out, based on limited information that I was able to find, both movie websites either may have actually debuted at the exact same time, or Stargate beat out Generations by a few months. Yeah, because the circumstances are out of my control, I don't exactly have a precise answer for this. Sadly, the actual page for Stargate has basically been scrubbed from the web, as even searching the Internet Archives left me in a bit of a blind spot. Tragically, it basically exists as lost online media forever. Thankfully, because fanboys are simultaneously the best and the worst, a safe page does exist for Star Trek Generations, and we can see it in all of its 2-bit pixelated early glory. Here we have all the features that would define early movie websites down the road: a plot synopsis, trivia, behind-the-scenes facts about the production, a trailer for the film, presented at the time in a very low-res, low-speed quality, and it was even a way to buy some Star Trek memorabilia. They didn't have Amazon then, so they couldn't automatically order something online, so it was a very, very slow wait. This page is much more boring and less stylized than what we'd eventually be used to seeing with these movie websites, but at the time, it was basically a revolution, a new and instantly faster way to sell a product. Both Stargate and Generations were successful for all intent and purposes, but they obviously weren't the primary factors for why studios were so quick to jump on the idea of creating movie websites. No, the sudden explosion in sales and popularity of computers and the internet itself was the main catalyst. See, even when we were facing the horrors of dial-up, the internet was a good way of interacting with people, and it was especially a good way of getting audiences to take a sudden faster interest in your movies. Spurred by the rise of online culture of the 1990s, suddenly studios realized they had a brand new avenue to connect their films to a larger audience, and as a result, a bunch of different movie websites started to pop up. Any major theatrical feature, often action or epic based, and intended for a wide audience, was going to get its own movie website. Not all of these early domains exist, as these pages tend to be tossed off the face of the internet forever, the minute the studios are done with these films as a major thing. Fortunately, plenty of them are saved via internet archives, or even as actual websites that existed or still exist online. Venturing through any of these websites will give you a huge nostalgia trip, and they also work incredibly well as they look at the history of the internet through time. The first and probably most famous example of this is the Space Jam website. Established by Warner Brothers in 1996, the domain has remained the same way. Even with the release of long delayed A New Legacy, you can still head on over to the original website, not as a recreation or as a saved file, but as the actual living, breathing thing, simply now with the tag 1996. This domain has miraculously survived 5 presidencies, the Iraq War, the financial crisis, the Queen's death, and somehow it's still here, standing strong and tall. This website fascinates us, not just because of the nostalgic quality of reminding us of simpler times, but because it represents mid-90s internet aesthetics to their fullest. Basic fonts on a black and white background, spinning images, tiny icons that you can barely see and click on, and a bunch of different links that take you to other parts of the website where you can see really poorly integrated online designs of the characters, or read very brief biographies of the people involved with the feature, not to mention some of the worst, most ancient, earliest examples of attempts at online movie sound clips you could hear.
You guys are nuts.
What do we care?
Now that's what I call state of the art. And then sometimes you also get this. Man, no news updates. It's 2023 and I've been waiting for 27 years now. Come on! The Space Jam website is basically an extremely early version of what would become a standard for movie websites going forward. Reading many biographies and just getting updates on the feature itself might not seem like much these days, but we take that sort of thing for granted now. In the much more different world of the 1990s, that wasn't as common, and it was much easier to get lost in as a result. Plus, adding the bonus of secrets and notes involving the production. All this, an interactive menu that you can use to click and explore. That's a recipe for what I would describe as a huge frickin' deal. Let's look at another example. This is the website for You've Got Mail, coincidentally another WB film, which still existed up until a couple of years ago when Warner Brothers furiously scrubbed it from the web for some reason. Now, instead of a page linking you to the website properly, you get sent a recommendation to buy or purchase the movie outright. Thankfully, this is what Internet Archives exists for. Immediately entering this site, we get bombarded with this little nugget. Lord knows how much I adore a Flash site. This site is just early internet to the max, and I love it for that. It's way more stylized and better put together than Space Jam's clunky website, but still an example of studios figuring out what to do with online. A lot of it is just white backgrounds with some substandard quality images. So yeah, not exactly the most creative thing from a modern lens, but pretty appealing by 1998 standards. I think the best thing about this site though is that when you click on various links like "Don't you just love New York in the fall?" or "Do you think we should meet?" instead of sending you to a biography or some production notes, it's just quotes from the actual movie transcribed in early AOL text. It's kind of shameful, like the movie itself, that I can't help but admire it. The only section that has something different is the Storybook Lady page, where they do some pretty prominent promotion for literacy for children advocating companies. As well though, every single novel that is featured in Meg Ryan's bookstore in the film is listed here. Keep in mind, this was during the days where people still had to shockingly look up what titles were featured in the final product, because say they might be confused by a noteworthy book title. This sort of text-based experiment would become the platform for movie websites going forward. It was simple, but in these early trying times, it was very effective, and allowed you to get immersed in the world of the film. Other movie websites would come after, many of them made on similar early Angel Fire type Blackboard-like structure. However, just like about anything, there would be variations and subsequent evolutions of this very same format. Think of this website released for the Lost World Jurassic Park, for example. This one plays out like a secret fictional ad, with its Web 1.0 corporate sections on promoting the marketing, systems, and security for InGen. I assume there are dinosaurs there too. As well though, it has a fun Easter egg style hunt that makes it look like you're exploring and subsequently getting trapped inside John Hammond's mansion. This is complete with an out-of-date television that doesn't work anymore and some audio that differs a bit slightly from the final product.
We've been on the verge of Chapter 11 ever since that accident in the park, and there are those in the company who wanted to exploit Site B in order to bail us out.
Ian, I know you've been my harshest critic, but if you would come out as an advocate, I know we could beat them.
Interestingly, this was actually part of an online sweepstakes, where the winner would be granted a trip to Outrigger Kauai Beach Hotel in Kauai, Hawaii. This is a contest where it's never been clear or confirmed if anyone actually won it. A large conspiracy theory that people are still trying to solve to this day. Or the Requiem for a Dream website, which doesn't give you any idea of the movie it's promoting, no photos of the main stars, no release date, no anything. Instead, it plays more like a fictitious website for Christopher McDonald's inspirational TV speaker, Tappy Tibbins. That's not all though, because click on another part of the website and you get this. Early browsers. Sometimes you just mystify me. The Donnie Darko website was another interesting example of this. It was less of a traditional movie website and played more like an interactive game, creating a puzzle that gave viewers clues and hints that they had to solve. It could be seen as confusing. I certainly remember discovering it and getting lost at points. But also it was genius, because it forced people to challenge themselves to the movie's perceived level of weirdness. It was actually a good way of filling in the gaps of the mystery. Probably the most vital early marketing movie website though was the Blair Witch Project. Just about everybody and their grandma of a certain generation is familiar with the infamous stigma around the film, about how they sold it as a real thing. The movie website certainly goes a long way towards building up that reputation, treating the entire thing like it was an actual infamous incident. And that early flash feeling certainly adds to the emptiness. There are so many other examples of these types of 2000s era websites, many of them that I recall viewing and being absolutely stunned by. To be frank though, I was too young to really get into these films, and I only discovered these websites until more recently in my younger years. Outside of Space Jam, they weren't really things that would naturally be on my radar. What was my thing though was the X-Men movie, so it probably wouldn't surprise you that when I discovered there was an X-Men movie website, I was completely fascinated by its presence. I loved the animated series as a kid, and was also starting to get into the comics. So to see actual stills from the movie with my favorite characters, including written bios of them, made my 7-year-old brain at the time go absolutely wild. The form of movie website had evolved so much that by the 2000s, it wasn't hard to run across one that didn't at least have clear sound and picture quality. Even as late as 2013, the Iron Man 3 page had a lot of interactive menus, trivia, and bios to follow, all of it set within the confines of Stark Industries. This brilliantly made the audiences feel like they were stuck in the movie proper. With movie websites, you had a completely different way of viewing a picture. Even if you had seen the movie already, you could hop on over to the site, discover more things about the film, and maybe have some fun playing around with additional content that the studio had set up for you. Sometimes these could be short games, and as the websites later progressed, it could also be your gateway into finding pre-YouTube era rare interviews with the prominent stars of the film. I remember as a kid exploring movie websites just as an excuse to download really low quality res versions of trailers, and then having to wait furiously to watch something that was literally like 2 minutes at best. It was really bad, but back then, it was all we had. As to why the movie website declined, well, the obvious culprit has to do with social media, but also social media is really only a failsafe of a much larger problem. Setting up a website requires quite a bit of money. I should know, I have one. And then you get in the issue of the actual amount of cash that is involved with the marketing, whether it's from the writers, the debuggers, the server designers, etc., etc. You can probably tell where this is going, particularly from the description of the titles that I listed out. That's a lot of people the studios have to cater to, or pay. Obviously in this case, they're going to be more interested in finding ways to get out of that. In comparison, social media is far more free. A studio can pump out a cool image or a trailer online, and within the hour, depending on the property itself, it can suddenly get millions and millions of clicks. They don't even need to worry about people finding that little screen at the end of the trailer. It just shows up on there immediately, or it's easy to track down in a matter of a minute. Then you add in typical other things used for promotion like streaming, and you have a recipe for something that has basically helped lay waste to the concept of a movie website as a whole. This brings us to maybe the most important part of the video. Should movie websites even exist anymore? Maybe it'd be cool if they came back just for old time's sake. Well, realistically, if I'm being honest, no they shouldn't. I love going back and trying to find domains for old movie websites that still exist online. It's a cool snapshot of a different era and relic, a time I just so happened to grow up in. However, the media has a way of changing, and with that we had to advance. As much as I respect the innate retroness of movie websites, and all the joyful tears that they bring me, I'm not exactly sobbing over their apparent demise either. Sure, I wouldn't mind if they actually came back. In fact, it would be kinda cool. However, marketing has a way of changing with the times. For example, radio was once an important part of selling things, be it a movie or a TV show. It still technically is, but in a much lesser way than it was prior. And that's what movie websites should be. It's a fun concept that you might bring back now and again for an anniversary, or as a way of honoring a long-time tradition, like with that recent Space Jam: A New Legacy page. However, as for it being the primary way to show to your audience that a feature is coming out, that ship has long sailed.